Hello and greetings, everyone. It's Gleekon. I'm back again, bringing you another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Strap on in. On our last episode, we got near the end of the Thousand Needles as the Horde, where we started messing around in the shimmering flats with a ponderously slow protection warrior trying to grind out kills against basilisks and vultures and scorpions and stuff. And we will continue that grind on the next episode. But for this episode, we're going to continue a book called The War of the Scaleborn. We finished chapter 6 last time, where Iridikron showed way back when, but long before everything in the ancient time, before the primals had really formed into our incarnates, although they've started to do that, and the aspects were barely aspects. Iridikron has found his sister, who's become an ordered dragon, and he has captured her with Raszageth, and they plan on using her as a sleeper agent. So stay a while and listen as we see how this story develops. The War of the Scaleborn, Chapter 7. For months, Raszageth appeared at the entrance to Icronia's lair once every clutch of moons. At first, Icronia hated their nighttime forays. They would destroy a village or two at random, Terrasek or mortal. Raszageth did not care. All that mattered to the Storm Eater was fire, terror, and blood. But as the season turned and the air chilled, the Terrasek's ranks began to swell at Harrow's Deep. Mortals joined them too, fleeing the destruction wrought seemingly at the talons of the aspects. Even the primal dragons took note, wondering about this change in the dragonflight's behavior. Once Icronia caught her brother's vision, she executed her task with relish. Mortal screams echoed through the night, sharp enough to pierce Raszageth's storms. Icronia dived through the air, breathing fire from her maw, setting a cluster of straw huts aflame. The dry grasses combusted. Small creatures burst from their entrances, shrieking in terror and pain. One mortal stumbled to the ground, eaten alive by the blaze. Icronia sped past, her wings fanning the fires into an inferno. Raszageth cackled overhead, hidden in the dark, swirling skies. The Storm Eater shot lightning bolts from her perch in the clouds, bright, brilliant flashes of blue-white light. How Icronia hated the half-mad incarnate. She understood her position, how these acts were needed to prove her worth and fealty to the cause. What she did not understand was the torment she suffered at Raszageth's talons. Even if Icronia followed her brother's directives, the Storm Eater might beat her anyway. Iridikron might have saved her life, but he had also condemned her to the Storm Eater's capriciousness. It was a mercy and a punishment, both. Icronia should have known better. She should have let Raszageth kill her the moment she saw her brother on the approach. From the shell, Iridikron's help had always come with caveats. He had been the bigger, faster, and more cunning of the two clutchmates. He had protected Icronia from the dragons who would prey upon her, but every time Iridikron saved her life, he extracted a price. A promise. A pound of scales, so to speak, but it was Raszageth who carved literal scales from Icronia's hide. She endured the pain because she too wanted to see the aspects in their flights fall. Icronia hadn't tarried among the flights just for a season, maybe two, long enough for her to realize she'd made a mistake. They had promised her a place in the Broodlands, but this place came coupled with duty and labor. The Black Aspect worked his flight to exhaustion. The Black Dragons commanded his forges, marched in his army, and constructed his bastion. Worse, she seemed to be the only one who did not support Neltharion's fanatical commitment to his oaths. Even among the swelling numbers of the Black Dragon flight, Icronia had never felt more alone. The little black dragon wheeled in the sky. Below her, fire rampaged across the landscape, devouring everything in its path. It chewed into the forests and coughed black smoke into the air. Birds and small creatures fled the flames. Mortals shrieked, and their whelps cried. To Icronia's mind, mortal lives were meaningless. Anything that was not a dragon was prey. She closed her wings and dived toward the village. Flames erupted from her maw, consuming everything in their path. With each village she burned and every life she took, Icronia defied the aspects and their keepers. She wished they could see her now, burning village after village in their hallowed names, sowing fear and destruction along their borders. However, Iridikron had forbidden her from speaking of her mission to anyone, including Farak. Perhaps someday this charge would end, and her brother would forgive her for her mistakes. For now, she would do as her brother had bidden her. Icronia tilted her wings to better ride Raszageth's ferocious currents. The Storm Eater demanded the total annihilation of the mortal villages, with perhaps one or two survivors spared. Someone had to spread the news that Alexstrasza's dragon flights were cruel, murderous creatures bent on the destruction of non-draconic races. Several mortals had already managed to escape the glittering inferno. Iridikron landed in a large central clearing. The smell of charred wood and burning flesh filled her nostrils, heady and intoxicating. The screams of the dying had quieted, leaving her alone with the roar of the fire and the howl of Razageth's winds. Movement drew her gaze to the left, to a gap between huts. A mortal whelp stumbled into view, tripping over its own feet and tumbling to the ground. When Iridikron turned toward it, the whelp screamed, a high, thin wail that carried over the storm. Iridikron growled, flames curling around her lips. A sharp pain slammed into the side of the black dragon's head, barely missing her eye. A hefty stone thudded on the ground near her feet. With a snarl, Iridikron turned, surprised to see a second mortal standing in the clearing, holding another rock in one hand. This mortal stood taller than the whelp. Its long, wild hair grew past its shoulders. "Do you think you can lure me away from your whelp, little beast?" Iridikron said, stalking toward the mortal. The tiny creature stood its ground, knees trembling. "It would be better for you to run." The creature spoke to the dragon in a feral, nonsensical tongue, then hurled another rock. The stone bounced harmlessly off Iridikron's chest. Before the dragon could say anything more, a blue-white bolt of lightning shot from the skies, slamming into the mortal. The creature spasmed, its eyes rolled back into its head as it crumpled to the ground. A long, thin wail unspooled into the night. Now, where was the whelp? Iridikron spun, seeking it. Her tail slammed into the remains of a burning hut and sent a spray of cinders into the air. The whelp burst from its hiding place, took one look at its mother's corpse, then skidded to a stop. It fell to the ground with another agonized wail, one that speared Iridikron's heart and shattered her bloodlust. This was not a cry of fear, but of a pain so deep it could crack the world. It was a cry of loss and something more. Loneliness. Iridikron knew that feeling all too well. The dragon halted, stunned by the emotion that welled up in her chest. "Kill it!" Razageth's voice rumbled from the skies, her voice deep as thunder. "It has seen me! Do not hesitate this time!" The very sound of the Storm Eater's voice made Iridikron's scars ache. "Iridikron!" Razageth roared. With a furious shriek, Iridikron struck the whelp down with her talons. She gave the little creature a clean, painless death. When she looked up, she thought she saw movement in the trees ahead. Whatever hid among the branches, she let it be. As Iridikron and Razageth withdrew from the village, the little whelp's final scream haunted her. Iridikron tucked it away in a shredded niche of her mind, remembering her hatred for the aspects and their false promises, then followed Razageth into the blackened horizon. In the north, Vyranoth left her den for a night hunt, soaring under radiant ribbons of turquoise, green, and purple lights in the starry sky. Vyranoth's mind whirled with conflicting thoughts and loyalties. Over the last few turns of the moons, Alexstrasza had been inviting Vyranoth to the Broodlands with greater regularity. Just yesterday, Alexstrasza had sent another one of her messengers to the Frozen Fangs, summoning Vyranoth to a feast at Wyrmrest Temple. Vyranoth had already declined 3 such requests that season. As much as she might miss Alexstrasza, she had no desire to subject herself to more heartbreak. Alexstrasza had made her choices, and she hadn't chosen Vyranoth. Then just that morning, Razageth had appeared at Vyranoth's area, asking the older dragon to race her through the Fangs. Now, that had been an invitation Vyranoth would accept with gladness. Perhaps it meant something that of late she felt a greater kinship with Razageth than Alexstrasza, but Vyranoth was not ready to face that reality. True, the Storm Eater was unpredictable and prone to violence. Vyranoth tried to temper Razageth's baser instincts, teaching the Incarnate to show mercy where it was due. Whether the Storm Eater listened to her counsel, Vyranoth could not say. Despite her ferocity, Razageth possessed a youthful exuberance and zest for life. She loved to summon strong winds and ride them across the landscape. She tempted Vyranoth to dive in the oceans from the great northern cliffs. But more than anything, Razageth loved to chase storms. She often flew north to revel in the Fang's terrible fury, often bringing Vyranoth a kill for the intrusion, or news from the south. Perhaps Vyranoth taught Razageth temperance, but the Incarnate showed her how to make the most of every moment. Still, Vyranoth could not turn her back on Alexstrasza, at least not completely. To clear her head, Vyranoth flew to the northern shores, hoping to hunt the great white bears on the ice floes, or perhaps a horned whale. She craved the sweet marbled flesh of the creatures that lived in the Fang's perpetual winter. As she cruised past the cliffs of the northernmost reaches, the sea stretched out before her, black and fathomless. Walls of sapphire blue ice rose straight from the waves, glowing in the bright moonlight. Icebergs speckled the waters, some as large as small islands, hosting restless seabirds and other wildlife. To her surprise, Virnoth spotted a small pack of dragons hunting fish several wing lengths off the coast. Most dragons weren't naive enough to encroach upon her territory. She thought, landing on a ledge to watch. A mottled green closed their wings and dived into the waters. Seconds later, a great whale surfaced, thrashing. Water exploded from its blowhole. A second dragon struck, raking their talons across the whale's back. Ribbons of blood spilled into the sea. The first dragon burst from the waves, a torn fin in their jaws. The whale's low, mournful cries echoed across the water. As the dragons hauled their kill to shore, Virnoth circled overhead. She had no intention of stealing the whale, though her stomach rumbled when the scent of blood hit her nostrils. They were young, barely out of drakehood. One of the dragons, a little slate-gray female, looked up at Virnoth, her eyes widening, snout already red with gore. She bugled a warning to her packmates. Two males, one the color of ochre, the other the mottled green of moss. Both craned their necks, looking at Virnoth in alarm. The green one eyed Virnoth as she landed. He lowered his gaze, but stepped in front of the other two in a protective manner. All three dragons looked as if they hadn't had a proper meal in many moons, their eyes sunken and cheeks hollow. Virnoth could count the ochre's every rib bone. The slate-gray shivered in the cold, wrapping her tail around her feet. Of the three, the mottled green looked the most hale, but even he was too wiry for a dragon of his size. Virnoth could smell their desperation and hear the rumbling in their bellies. She pitied them, but not too much. "You cannot hunt here, young ones," Virnoth said, stalking toward them, ice in her voice. "This is my territory." The slate-gray female backed up a step, dropping her head to protect her throat. She turned her gaze down, too. "Ancient One, these waters are yours?" "Yes, mine," Virnoth replied. The mottled green shifted his weight, looking down at the slate-gray female. He extended a wing over her shivering form. "Could we go far over the water to hunt?" Virnoth narrowed her eyes. "Too far, you die. Why did you come to the Fangs?" The slate-gray shivered harder. "The Ordered Ones chased us from our grounds. It's cold here, but we're hungry. So hungry." Virnoth sighed. "You had no choice?" The slate-gray bobbed her head. Despite her loneliness, Virnoth had no desire to share her territory with three strangers, yet she could not leave these young ones to starve either. Many dragons had gone east to the Broodlands. Those who hadn't had expanded their territories and defended them jealously, pushing younger, less experienced dragons to the fringes. Loath to help, but unable to stand by, Virnoth sighed. "Very well, but you must obey my rules." The slate-gray blinked and cocked her head. "And anything," the ochre said, stepping forward. "A kill for me every 3 moons," Virnoth said. "You will not kill for sport. You will respect my solitude and find your own lairs. Agreed?" "Yes," the mottled green said. "Good." Virnoth spent the rest of her afternoon with the young ones. The stone-gray primal dragon was Nalakrona, the ochre Zarnin, and the mottled green Razvik. Virnoth flew with them around the coast, pointing out fertile hunting grounds and potential locations for aeries and dens. As Razvik and Nalakrona inspected one such cave, Virnoth and Zarnin hovered outside. In the east, the sun peeked over the horizon, gilding the mountain peaks and coloring them in soft pinks. Overhead, the skies burned orange. The cave's mouth was draped in shadows, well hidden among the cliffs and crags. "Many thanks, Ancient One," Zarnin said. "Their eggs were taken twice now." "Taken?" Virnoth narrowed her eyes. "The entire clutch? How?" Primal parents might lose an occasional egg in the wilds, but to lose so many in a row was unusual. "Eggs gone," Zarnin said, lifting his shoulders in a shrug. "Some say the stone skins. Egg stealers." "Stone skins?" Virnoth repeated, picturing a titan forged in her mind's eye. In the Broodlands, little Talon Straws and Layla Straza had been inexplicably afraid of the eyes in the rocks and being taken, and Virnoth began to wonder if those fears weren't as irrational as she had thought. Whelplings were often cognizant of their surroundings while still in the shell. If something had taken the whelplings' eggs... No, if someone had taken them from their nest, that would explain their fears. And you have seen these egg stealers? Virnoth asked. Zarnine shook his head. No, just talk. Dragon talk. Terrasec talk. Terrasec? Virnoth asked, confused. Why Terrasec? Terrasec disappear, he replied. Villages burn. She frowned. Could this be true? Neltharion had always struck Virnoth as a shrewd strategist. Like Iridikron, the Black Aspect could be single-minded in pursuit of his goals. If these rumors had any truth to them, perhaps someone in the Broodlands quietly sought to bolster the dragonflights while depleting the primal dragon's numbers in the wilds. It was a cruel, heartless strategy, but Virnoth could see how the Aspects might leverage it against Iridikron. But she sensed Iridikron's presence in all this too. Now that Krona even smelled a little like the Incarnate, which could mean they were related. The dragon's appearances in the Fangs could be as much chance as it could be one of Iridikron's well-constructed ploys. The Stone Scale did love his schemes, which was one reason why Virnoth continued to eschew his cause. It's a rumor, she told herself, nothing more. But perhaps all she wanted was to believe her own lie. Yeah, so I'm not entirely convinced. While we know what some of this is coming from Ikrona and Iridikron's plot. We also know some of the egg stealing is coming from the Ordered Dragons. We don't know how prevalent that is at this point in time, this much later. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Iridikron had a similar strategy of his own. All right, so we have another episode in the pipe, 5x5, and we have another time where I appreciate you for tuning in. See you next time on Lore of Warcraft.